What's a juicy company secret the public's not supposed to know? Any Wells Fargo banker can refund any fee on a checking or savings account if they want to. The computer tells them if they can or not, but you can override that by just typing your employee number in. Corporate rarely follows up. I refunded all fees BC. I don't like arguing. After 4 years, my boss told me I was singled out in a meeting BC. I had refunded the second most fees in the entire company, only behind the guy in charge of all consumer banking products. They never told me to stop or anything. Used to work in fruit packing factory. For love of God, wash your fruit before eating. Also, Mark and Spencer fruit are the same fruit which are in Aldi. Only difference is visual look. Firstly, we sorted perfect looking fruit for MS, then rejected fruit were sorted for Aldi. I worked at a certain smoothie place that uses fresh squeezed juice, not from concentrate. The only juice that wasn't from concentrate was the orange juice, and that was freshly squeezed out of the Tropicana cartons I bought from the grocery store across the street before we opened every morning. Automakers don't really win awards, they just buy them and brand them. Source: Motor Trend Truck of the Year, and whatever JD Power Truck of the Year. One of my first jobs was for a warehouse which receives clothes for a popular boutique across the country. For the love of anything good, wash your clothes when you get them home before wearing them. I've seen mold oozing out of the boxes and rats scurrying out of crates. I worked for a cable company that passes equipment out with roaches and bed bugs in them. Still happens all the time. There's no real way to stop it that I know of. Everything is just sent back out once turned in. I worked at a Chili's, and those fajitas aren't actually sizzling like that right off the grill. They squirt this sodium mixture on it and heat it on a hot plate to get that crackling effect you see whenever a server brings it out. I used to work for a company that did personality and skills tests for applying for jobs. I know everyone hates those. The truth is, people who take personality tests last longer in jobs than those who don't, so companies love them. But here is the thing, it doesn't even matter what your score or profile is, the result is the same: you will stay longer on average. The only logical conclusion is that people who are willing to jump through bullshit hoops to get hired make better employees because they are willing to jump through bullshit hoops, and probably not because their personality is a match. I worked in a major hospital lab in an Australian city. We had an outbreak of an unknown strain of something get loose in the actual hospital itself, and we were told to not tell our family or friends in case it somehow became publicly available news. We eventually traced it back to the source, apparently just a sink where a woman changed her baby's nappy, and were able to quarantine and isolate the area. The woman and her baby were treated and returned to normal. But to this day, we are unable to categorize whatever this outbreak was. It's the only case of it ever happening anywhere, if you can believe that, and it really didn't sit well with me that the default policy was we don't know what's going on, but the public can't know. Itstobr secret. Makes you wonder how often shit like this happens. When I was in kindergarten, in the middle of the school year, we were told the teacher was going away on a vacation to her native Colombia. I remember thinking, now what? I asked how the teacher could do that, and was told to shut up, and that as a teacher they could do what they wanted when they wanted. I, as the student, was only required to shut up and obey. I genuinely asked how we were going to learn without a teacher, and we were told to mind our own businesses, and that was that. I then remember, along with the other students, wondering how we would learn. This was on a Friday, and the next Monday we got a substitute teacher. I remember asking them why they hadn't told us straightforward about having a substitute, and was told to shut up. This was a private school in the early 90s in USA. Some private schools were unaccredited back then, so they did stuff that wouldn't fly today. The teacher probably had a sick or dying relatively, so they didn't want to tell the kids the truth. They could have still told us the substitute teacher was taking her place for a while, so the substitute teacher was mean and would scream at us for the tiniest mistakes, and even threat us with locking us up in a closet for a weekend. The teacher later came back and we finished the year. In first grade I mentioned that substitute teacher and everyone said I was crazy and that hadn't happened ever. I was then referred to a psychologist as a crazy person who mentions people that don't exist. The psychologist tried to get me to admit that I was crazy and a danger to humanity. The psychologist had to see I was the one who was right and the school was in the wrong, but still, one of the worst days of my life. They probably had complaints from the other parents about the substitute teacher, and since the substitute teacher turned out to be a friend of the actual teacher and the substitute teacher was an illegal immigrant, they wanted a secrecy around the matter. I work for a major nonprofit. Almost all the marketing you see about how great of a change they've made is BS. Half the time the leadership is preventing staff from doing anything that'd be too disruptive to the status quo that creates the problems that nonprofit says it's trying to address because they're too scared of upsetting the politicians they depend upon to pass legislation, or the big corporate and private donors that give them enough money to have six-figure salaries for the executive team. The other half of the time, The executive team tries to do the bare minimum, then take credit for the transformative and groundbreaking work being done. That work is generally a stripped down and micromanaged version of whatever the staff and experts actually say they should do. Yap was a poster child for a non-profit for homelessness. Spoke at conferences, news interviews, all for meager compensation like gift cards and stipends, while I was homeless, obviously, yet when I called out one of their business partners for attempting to underpay a job applicant due to their immigration status, I was told to just hush about it. Of course, I was eventually dropped like a hot potato as if I never existed. It's something I saw a lot of before I finally landed my own place. Grifting is much more common than we believe. This is why I turn my social justice efforts to grassroots organizations nowadays. I don't think it's prohibited from the public knowing, but it's a Fortune 500 company that got some flack in the pandemic for how they treated their essential workers. They are now not only fighting for a merger to add to their 3,000 stores and gas stations that will close many stores to comply with antitrust laws, but they are eliminating over 250 tech positions to support those stores and outsourcing them to Egypt, Mexico, and India. Their stores are already understaffed given insufficient hours, and workers are stretched thin so they can avoid paying for benefits. And the execs all got million-dollar bonuses. I don't think it's a surprise to anyone, but they call themselves patriotic and community leaders. I worked at a sports bar that was popular due to their wings. The most popular wing sauce was garlic parmesan, which was just Renee's Mighty Caesar salad dressing. The top 5 sauces were as follows: garlic parmesan, Renee's Caesar, original barbecue, honey garlic garpar, honey garlic Caesar, hot honey garpar, Frank's Red Hot, honey, Renee's Caesar. We also had various dry rubs, which were mostly popcorn shaker flavors you'd buy from your local grocery store. I confess to occasionally using dill pickle popcorn shakers on my air-fried wings at home out of habit.
I don't work here anymore, but it's pretty juicy. PetSmart in Canada did away with most of its safety procedures for pet grooming when it was privately bought out in 2015. Previously, we had been held to pretty strict standards for pet and groomer safety that protected both pets and employees from harm. One of the main reasons these procedures need to be in place, aside from the obvious, is groomers make 50% commission on every service they complete. If safety standards are not enforced, they will often push pets or themselves much further than they should, risking severe injury and even death to the pet. Around 50 animals have died in PetSmart salons because of low safety standards and subpar groomer training. Some mandatory rules they removed included sending pets home when the temperature in the salon reached higher than 30 degrees Celsius (86 degrees Fahrenheit). It gets hot and humid with hot water and hot dryers on all day, and if the air conditioning isn't working, it's a miserable experience for everyone. Summer of 2015, the sale was in March, our AC broke, and our salon temps reached 35 degrees Celsius. We were bathing the dogs in cool water, sometimes multiple times, just to keep them from passing out in a few cases. Myself and a few others received formal write-ups and reprimanded for sending elderly and diabetic dogs home without completing their grooms, because they were in such rough shape we thought they might die on our tables. Another rule they seemingly did away with is halting services if a pet is displaying severe signs of stress that can lead to death. A few examples would be: a dog's tongue is starting to look purple or blue, they're usually panting heavily but still oxygen deprived, a dog or cat is suddenly unable to stand and support its own body weight, pupils are heavily dilated and seem unable to focus, excessive vomiting or diarrhea, etc. This wasn't officially done away with, but it is not enforced. It completely depends on the experience of the location's salon manager. Many salons will not have an experienced leader, it's whoever has seniority, and that person could very well be just out of training themselves. I've worked in a few salons like this and ended up as manager myself when I was barely out of school, simply because I was the last one standing after a round of walkouts. Another rule they got rid of was age and breed restrictions on kennel dryers. This means a dog will get put in a kennel, with dryer hoses hooked up to the front of the cage, to blow dry them while they're in there. Previously, senior and brachycephalic, flat-nosed, dogs could never be kennel dried. Elderly dogs and cats cannot take the heat, snub-nosed dogs can't breathe with the air in their faces. Kennel drying is generally only used if a dog can't tolerate the velocity dryer safely, it's very noisy and the air creates a weird pressure on their skin. PetSmart groomers are expected to complete as many grooms as possible per shift, with a minimum of 5 dogs in an 8-hour shift, so they rely heavily on kennel dryers to help them book extra dogs. One dog comes in, do the prep work and bath, then kennel dry it while prepping the next dog and bathing it. That dog goes into the dryer, and the first comes out to get finished. Previous to 2015, they were not allowed to do this. But groomers themselves will do this everywhere, not just PetSmart, so they can push dogs through faster and make more commissions. Groomers have a specific amount they have to make daily to commission out, or exceed what they would have made with their base pay, which is minimum wage. It is not an easy job and requires years of experience to do well. No one wants to do it for minimum wage. PetSmart pricing is lower than smaller privately owned salons because they make money in quantity, not quality. It takes 7 to 8 dogs a day to average what a groomer working outside of a corporation makes. Why do groomers even bother with PetSmart at all then? It's the cheapest way to start a career. Our equipment is really expensive, it can take years to acquire decent tools, and the cost of maintaining them is expensive. We pay out of pocket to sharpen all our own blades. That's dozens of clipper blades on full scissor sets of every style and size. We replace our own broken equipment too. One chipped blade tooth and you're out $70. Grooming is easy to get into because it's not a regulated industry. You don't even need to finish high school to do it. But you need to do your time as an apprentice to learn it, and you need to buy all your equipment. PetSmart will give you a cheap kit and send you away for a month of training if you sign a 2 years, full-time, contract to pay them back. A lot of people do it so they can work while they build a better toolkit. Most of them quit before the 2 years are done. I've never seen PetSmart go after anyone over it. It's not often you're going to get a really experienced groomer at PetSmart because of this. I'm spilling the beans to shame the shit out of this company, because I had to watch a 17-year-old cat that should never have even been allowed in the salon at all due to its age. Elderly cats are extremely susceptible to stress deaths, die on my manager's table because she would not send it home. She was too afraid of losing her job, which the store manager threatened us with often, not directly, but people being randomly fired over BS things was common. The cat was displaying beyond clear signs of extreme distress, so intense that we begged the store manager to call the vet, and were refused. Store manager is senior to salon manager, and she was forced to continue. The cat had a heart attack and died right there. My salon manager was also forced to inform the owners and hand over the body of their cat herself, even though she was in no condition to do that. The owners were offered a financial settlement privately if they signed a contract stating they would not sue or go to the media. I never saw my salon manager again after she left that day. A week later, I was made the new manager. I was barely 2 years into grooming myself at the time. I left shortly afterwards and took my clients with me, breaking my 2 years contract and the agreement that I wouldn't poach clients if I did leave at any point. I worked for myself after that, and I will never step foot in one of those stores again, just pay the extra $20 something to go to a smaller salon for pet grooming. Groomers that make a living wage from those higher commissions will actually have the time to be gentle and take care of your pets. They aren't going to lose their jobs if they need to take your pet to the vet for emergency care either.